Now, this stretch of condos is not new and it's not central, but it's been making 530k average profit over its 600 plus transactions in the past 5 years. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be deep diving into Bedok Reservoir resale condos and really looking at the data on how this small little stretch has been quietly performing in the market. So before we look at the numbers, let's first look at the location for context. So today we're going to be focusing on these 7 condos here that are along Bedok Reservoir. So when we look at these condos, it's actually quite interesting because it's not exactly the youngest stretch of condos. The last condo TOP here was Waterfront Isle, and that was all the way back in 2015, whereas the older ones here like Aquarius TOP in 2000, making the age range of condos here between about 10 to 25 years old. Now if you also look at the number of units, in total is about 3,000 units, so this actually reminds me of the Lentor cluster. And when you think about stretches of condos that have a lot of supply in a small amount of space, do you think that it will positively affect your prices or negatively? Now traditionally you might think that there might be a lot of competition, so it actually stagnates prices, but when I look into the data, it actually told quite the opposite story. So between 2019 and 2025, the growth has been about 41%. Now back then it was about 1,000 plus per square foot, and then today is around 1,500 plus per square foot on average for this stretch. So you can see the growth is very healthy over here. Now looking at the transaction, what surprised me even more was in 660 transactions that has taken place in the past 5 years, 645 of them were profitable. So you can see the rate of unprofitable transactions here is very, very low, even with the high volume that is transacting. Looking at the individual development transaction, what was even more interesting to me is that it is not just those that bought at new launch and held for a lot of years that are making very good profit. Like you can see from the Clearwater, even those that bought just 5 years ago are making super healthy profits at about 500 to 800k. That means even if you come in resale here and you're not the first hand owner, you will still be able to sustain the value of your unit very well. If you look at Waterfront Key also, you can see a lot of them are only holding for 3 years plus, but still the profit is very steady at 500k, 600k, even 800k for such a short period of holding time. So all in all, we really want to understand today what is it that makes this area so strong in its growth and being able to hold its value. So before we go into what makes or breaks this area and things you should be looking out for, whether it's for a resale here or elsewhere, let's first look at the surface level appeal of this area, or what I would call MSN. Not the messenger, but MRT, school and nature, which are the typical 3 things that most Singaporean buyers are looking out for and that will help draw demand into the area. So if you look at the Bedok Reservoir area, firstly, you have your MRT there, and this connects to the downtown line. So from almost all of the condos, it's a pretty easy walk over, not too far. Now second, you're going to have a lot of primary schools in the area surrounding. Now even have very popular ones like Red Swastika over here. And of course, lastly, you will have the nature factor, which is your Bedok Reservoir Park that is over here. So this also means that in all the developments, no matter what you're facing is, you get a pretty good view because you're either facing the reservoir at the front, or you are facing the back towards the Bedok Town Park, or even if you're facing inwards, it will be likely towards the pool. So there are very few bad facing or views here in that sense. So in essence, this area could be seen as a triple threat when it comes to that 3 factors. But if you've seen any other of my previous videos, you know that just because you have these 3 things, it doesn't always mean a condo does well. So we want to look a little bit deeper as to what makes this area so special too. Now the first thing you want to look at is supply. Now what really baffled me also is if you jump into the Bedok Reservoir and then you swim to the other side, you could be losing 2 to 300k. Now what do I mean by that? Looking at the average profit of Bedok Reservoir condos, you can see on average it's about 500 to 600k. But if you go to the other side of the pond, which is the Tampines side, the average profit suddenly drops. It is about 200 to 300k on average. So I really wanted to understand what the difference was here. Now first, I looked at the supply. So don't be too confused by the map. I've overlaid the usage map from the URA website. So all you need to know is that the orange part actually represents residential. So focusing along the Bedok Reservoir side, you can see that all the parts that are highlighted orange have already been used up or built on. There's actually no more land space for any other new condos to come up here without any changes to the map, which means that since 2015, there has been no new supply that has been injected here and has helped the value of those older condos hold as well. Now this is added by the fact that if you look at the grand scale of Bedok, it is largely a HDB estate. I would say at least 90% is HDB, and to begin with, you have very few condos already except for this stretch over here. So the lack of supply in Bedok as a whole has really helped to hold the value over here, aside from the fact that this is a very attractive area for a lot of own stay owners. Now then, coming back to be said is, what is the difference from the Tampines side then that the profit can be so different? So if we look at the Tampines area, there was something that jumped out to me in terms of the supply there that is different from Bedok. Yes, you also have a stretch of condos along a short stretch, but what they also have is resale ECs that are in the mix as well as new ECs. Now, why is this going to impact their value? Because when you have a resale EC that is going to give you the benefits of the same location but at a cheaper price than your private condos, naturally that is going to pull away some of the demand, and that will affect the value and growth of your private condo. Of course, that's not to say that the Tampines side is bad. It just serves a very different purpose. So for example, what I mean is, if you look at the resale price of the Alps, which is a condo along this stretch, you can see that in 2019, when it first TOP, you could get a 936 square foot at about 1.1 million to 1.2 million. Now, at the same time, this is when the Arc Tampines also MOP for the EC and came into the market. You could get a resale EC similar in size, 900 plus square feet, for 900,000 plus. So naturally, a lot of buyers are going to explore the cheaper option here as well, and that's going to pull away some of the demand of the private condo and slow down the growth of the condo over there. Which is why we see quite the opposite story for the resale ECs at the Tampines stretch versus the condo stretch, because the average profit for a resale EC in Tampines is actually very similar in the past 5 years as a Bedok Reservoir condo. So you can see for Arc, Trillion, City Life, even though a bit further out, on average it's all going to be about 400 to 500k profit. So definitely I would say the growth is a bit healthier for the EC and faster than the private condos in that area. Now linking this back to the Bedok Reservoir area, now in that stretch, we have no resale ECs as well as in the general Bedok area. So there is no competing EC supply there, which again helps to hold its value because there are no cheaper options. So in terms of supply, we can see that the stronghold of Bedok Reservoir is that there is no new competing new launches there, as well as no cheaper EC options there for buyers to basically look at and compete with. So in essence, the supply is going to help hold the value there for the long run. So the next question we need to ask ourselves is, who are the buyers coming into this area? Now already we know that this is quite an own stay area, which again, going back to the supply point, you might assume there's a high turnover here because of the number of units, but in reality very little resale units are put out because buyers here actually stay longer, which again adds to that supply constraint, helping the area hold and grow its value. Now the other thing we want to look at is the surrounding area. So if you look at what is surrounding Bedok Reservoir, all this purple is HDBs. And you might have heard the saying that if there are HDBs in the area, that means a lot of upgraders are going to come in and this is going to boost your value. But what a lot of people fail to look at is what is the price of the HDBs relative to the condo in the area, and how affordable is it actually for someone that sells to move into the condo nearby. So let's take a closer look. Now, one of the most recent MOP BTOs in Bedok will be Bedok Northwoods, and this is very close to Bedok Reservoir over here. So they just MOP this year. Now, when they purchased their BTO, on average for a 4-room, it was about 450k. Now today on average, the estate is selling about 930k. So how much profit are they actually getting back from that sale? So assuming they sell at 930k, that would mean 480k cash, maybe a bit more if they already service more of the loan. And then let's say they use 100k for their CPF, they'll take that back as well, leaving a total total of 580k. So where does that 580k get you as the seller to purchase a condo? So let's look at the nearest condos in Bedok Reservoir. So again, if you are this 4-room HDB seller, let's say you now want to buy a 3-bedroom at Waterfront Isle for about 2 to 2.1 million. So your 25% down payment is going to be about 500k, and with your stamp duty 69k, that brings your total to 569k. So you can see that for the BTO sellers at Bedok, it is actually very affordable and comfortable for them to go to a 3-bedroom condo at Bedok Reservoir with coming out little or even no extra cash. So in essence, you can see that the condo structure actually caters well for the surrounding HDB crowd. Now, if you look even closer at the surrounding of these Bedok Reservoir condos, you can see that there's actually a lot of incoming HDB BTOs from nearby areas as well, on top of those that have yet to MOP. So while there is no new incoming condo supply to this immediate area, nearby there's actually a lot of new HDBs and BTOs coming up, which will further help pump up that demand in the future. So the last thing we want to consider is what is the price of the resale here relative to the nearby new launches. Though they are not apple to apple in comparison and are two completely different products, when you're going to a resale, it's crucial you look at what is the price gap from the newer developments, because when new and resale become the same price, then resale will lose its advantage. So looking at the area, the nearest development that is new will be Sky Eden in central Bedok. So this is averaging at about 2,100 per square foot in terms of the units that were sold there as a middle ground. Now, not too far off as well at Tanah Merah, Seneca was sold on average 2,065 per square foot. So with our average of about 1,500 per square foot at Bedok Reservoir's resale, we have quite a healthy gap of about 500 to 600 PSF. Now, another nearby plot that has not been launched yet, but the land has already been sold, will be the Bayshore GLS. And based on the land price for that, estimated it will be launched at average 2,800 PSF, which will create an even bigger gap of 1,300 per square foot. So if we're going to quantify that in terms of how the price gap is, let's take for example Sky Eden, which would be the nearest. So if average is 2,100 per square foot when they bought, let's say their 3-bedroom at 1,087 square feet, the owner just wants to sell for 200 PSF more at 2,300. This would mean that the resale price is 2.5 million for the new development. Now let's look at Waterfront Isle because it's the youngest in the Bedok Reservoir area. So let's say you're buying in at 1,600 today, and down the road you want to sell at also 200 PSF more, 1,800, taking a similar size unit of 1,152. This means the selling price will be about 2 to 2.1 million, to be exact 2.07 million. So you can see the gap is about 500k, and someone coming in with a 2 mil budget versus 2.5 mil budget, there is a lot of difference. Likely this group of people, very few of them will be able to jump between the two budget. And while 2.5 mil you can consider Sky Eden as well as Bedok Reservoir, if you're coming in with a 2 to 2.1 million budget only, you will likely only be looking at the Bedok Reservoir area. So this creates enough of an independent separate market between the newer developments and the resale at Bedok Reservoir in order for it to be able to keep its stronghold and sustain its value and unique market positioning. So in conclusion, Bedok Reservoir is able to hold its very healthy growth because of its unique location. You have very little incoming competition as well as a very strong incoming support of demand in the area. But as with all resale, do also consider, aside from the macro factors that we looked at today, the micro factors, because in resale you have a lot of variation like your pricing as well as the unit condition. So do your homework before you go into one, and if you need help with that, you can always reach out to me. Now that's all for today's video. If you all enjoyed resale analysis like this, do drop in the comments below what areas or developments you want me to look into, and I'll catch you all in the next video.